Welcome back, everyone, to the Qualified Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zielinski. With me today is Ryan Knoll with Tidy Casa. Ryan, welcome,
That's right.
and thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Michael, great to be here. I'm excited to get qualified with you.
Excellent. I like that. First person to say that for me. So what's background info? Where did you grow up? Where were you born? Always in Arizona, or did you move
No,
there?
I moved with my parents when I was really young, but I mean, I was so young it didn't really matter too much. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. Nothing really there. It's farm country. Even though I was in a city of like 500,000 people growing up, the only thing I really recall is it being very cold and the people being pretty nice. That was about it. But yeah, I moved to Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona, when I was like 9. Been here ever since.
Okay. I just visited Scottsdale in July during that enormous heat wave
Yeah, wrong
for,
time to come. A bad idea.
yeah. Yeah, that was our got married in October, and that was our bachelorette. We did a combine, got a big
Oh, cool.
Airbnb mansion. So there was about 16 of us sharing a house, and from the moment we woke up until about 3 p.m., we were either inside or in the pool, nowhere
Yeah, I
else.
was gonna say they probably had a pool if it was a mansion. That's the one thing about Arizona. It'll be 115, but it's a dry heat, and you got a pool, so it makes it tolerable.
I
And
would
everybody's
definitely,
got awesome air conditioning. So, yeah. So wrong time
absolutely.
to come. I'm upset that you didn't invite me for a beer, but we'll get it next time.
Absolutely. Well, that'll be my only bachelor party for myself, but I will come and visit and play around a
Yeah,
golf out there, so
I was
we
gonna
could do
say
it then.
plenty of awesome golf.
Absolutely. What's the best thing about Scottsdale, in your opinion, then?
I mean, people move here for the weather, right? Beautiful weather, beautiful people. There's actually surprisingly a lot of good food. Like you're in Chicago, it's like one of the meccas of great food. But for being kind of this second tier, third tier city, like Scottsdale and Phoenix is, it's got a lot of really good food. But you come here for the weather. When it's not 115, like right now, it's middle of or end of December, and it's almost it's gonna be about 60 degrees today. No rain, no snow. I haven't had to shovel snow or scrape ice off my windshield in, years and years and years because I live here. So that's pretty great.
That's definitely something that I could get behind is not dealing
Yeah.
with 2 feet of snow. Again, I would
Yeah.
miss it if I moved, but for when it happens, it's just annoying then.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. And the good news is we do have about 2 hour drive you can get to snow. So it's in the proximity, but we're in the valley, so it's we don't really get it too much. But uh, yeah, great weather, and we get a ton of people from the Midwest, from Chicago. I mean, Nebraska is technically part of the Midwest, even though it's smack dab in the middle of the country. But that's why my parents came. They're like, nope, I'm done with tornadoes. I'm done with snow. We're going to Scottsdale. So.
For sure. It's a lot of secondary homes and stuff like that instead of like Florida, the
Oh
humidity and
yeah,
the heat.
yeah,
You go and dry heat, which I would again prefer
yeah.
doing the dry heat versus the humidity. But
Yeah,
everybody's different.
tons of Canadians with like secondary homes down here.
Really? That I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know.
we get quite a few. Yeah, yeah, you just be walking around, you'll run into them. So
So when you
anyway,
were younger, did you know that you were going to be a business owner, or what were your thoughts growing up as a kid?
I not when I was young, but I think around the time when I was about 16, I remember we moved to Scottsdale because my uncle owned a business and my dad was going to work for him. And he lived here in Scottsdale. And I just remember, my parents drove this like kind of beat up old minivan and my uncle pulled up in a brand new Porsche. And I was like, hey, I want to be that guy, not my parents driving this minivan. And ever since then, um, I've been really motivated to go that direction. Then I was also terrible in school. Like my GPA was something like insane, like 1.05 or something. I literally had a teacher tell me, or a guidance counselor, not really good guidance, tell me that I'm never going to make more than $30,000 a year. and I'm probably going to go into a life of crime. I mean, it was a really bad meeting. I just remember leaving and being like, screw that person. Like, what does he know about me? But I always kind of, I wasn't good at school. I didn't like memorizing things. That wasn't the type of like intelligence that I had. I'm very like tactile and creative and everything else. So, it was just never my path to like go be an accountant or something. When I saw my uncle like having this life and, my parents having their life, I really wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps and do the entrepreneur thing. And he's the person who I really credit with inspiring me and kind of showing me that it's possible to make money working for yourself and have a really good life.
Don't you love those, looking back at teachers or professors who kind of knock you and
Yeah.
say, well, you're not gonna achieve anything. And looking back now, you're like, well, I wonder what
Yeah,
you're
screw
doing.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're still probably teaching classes for which I'm not knocking teachers, but it's just the ones that,
No. Yeah.
pick out the kids that don't succeed right away and put a label on them that they're not going to succeed.
Yeah, no, all respect to teachers. I mean, teachers are great. We need them in the world. They definitely don't get paid enough. Like, there's no world where like teachers getting 35, 40K a year is being paid enough for the amount of stuff they have to deal with. I got plenty of friends that are teachers, and I absolutely love them. It's such a great opportunity to really provide um, support and like change somebody's life. Because I have teachers on the other side of the spectrum that I remember way more fondly that taught me about like meditating and video production and being creative and, how to paint and all this stuff that I owe so much to. And then there's just this one, there's just this one guidance counselor that was really bad at her job. But looking back, knowing what I know now about psychology and how people work, um, that wasn't about me. That was about her. Something was going on in her life that she just had to rat on this, 15-year-old boy and tell him that he was, an asshole or whatever. Yeah.
Besides your uncle, anybody else, business owners that you kind of learned from, or was it just your uncle that saw and you're like, I want to learn everything
Yeah,
off
he
of
was
you?
the first person that I saw and really was inspired by. But growing up, I had a lot of exposure to business owners because I was growing up in Scottsdale, and if you know anything about Phoenix, Arizona, and Phoenix Metro, there's about 5 million people here. Scottsdale's this little sliver, and it's like the Beverly Hills or whatever of um, Phoenix, and so it's where all the rich people are, and that just means they're doctors or lawyers or they're business owners. So I had a lot of exposure to them through friends who had parents that were successful business people or whatever. And there was a moment when I was like maybe turning like 17, 18. I just really wanted to learn this, and no matter like it just always felt like nobody had the one answer for me, like how do I start a business, like just tell me what the secret sauce is already, give it to me. So I would just say, hey, anybody that wants to, I'll take you out to lunch, I'll pay for it out of my like pizza bus boy salary, and take you to the lunch. I just want to pick your brain and learn. And like anybody who's dad or mom or the neighbor or anyone who had any kind of success or a business, or like even if they weren't in business for themselves, I just wanted to talk to them and learn what they had to teach me. And everybody kind of gave you these little nuggets, but I didn't really get, you didn't get a lot from it. Eventually, you just have to like rubber has to hit the road. You got to learn and just bang your head against the wall for 4 or 5 businesses until you figure out like, oh, I'm just going to start a cleaning business and that's how I'm going to make a couple $1 million. So, that's the journey, I guess.
It would be great if there was a one-stop shop of, hey, here's this book or here's this
Mm-hmm.
movie, watch this, and all your answers will be given to you about business and all. But that's just
Yeah.
not how it works.
Well,
And that's the reason for this podcast, like we were talking a little bit earlier on, what route is this going? And everybody gets interviewed because there's a million different ways to run this type of service business. So
right. Yeah, definitely.
finding
Yeah, I
those
mean,
answers for somebody is the call. They're what we're going for.
I'm with you. I'm for it. I just and it's one of the things. So I do business coaching now for a company called Conquer, and I one of the reasons that really drew me to that was that exact thing that you're talking about. It's so valuable and rewarding for me to help teach people how to do this stuff because nobody was really there to teach me. Like I had people that take me to lunch and things, but I think the thing that I learned is like a lot of the people that were successful that I was kind of targeting to have a conversation with, you just sort of talk to them and they didn't really have the answer for you. Like, yeah, they were wealthy, they were living in a mansion, but they were, the person that was managing some big fund for Vanguard, like a sales guy, and they just happened to get a big client. And, a lot of the formula just came down to luck for them. So when you would ask them, how'd you be so successful? It usually came down to luck or grit. And then eventually you start figuring out that there is a formula, there is a way. Like if we can, do a business that other people have already done before, don't be the first person in the industry or in the category. Like if you're trying to do Facebook, like even Facebook or Google weren't the first people to do that. Facebook was like the sixth or seventh social network. Google was like the 18th, search engine. Like I know we all remember Yahoo and Alta Vista and all those.
Jeeves,
They
ask
just
Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves. Yeah, there's one called Dogpile I used to use that would like help search on like three. It was silly. Um, but do something that somebody's already doing that there's already a proven market for. And when you're going to do something like house cleaning, electrical, HVAC, you can look out there and see what works, see what doesn't, and you're already starting on like second base because you can basically steal anybody else's business plan there, and then the only trick comes down to you got to execute on it better.
Take somebody else's and just put rubber to the ground and run with it. I mean, look, you can do it if you're doing a cleaning service. You could go square foot. You could do hourly. You could do
Yeah.
bedrooms, bathrooms, stuff like that. So it just the sky's the limit
Yeah.
with this, and it's not. People would be like, oh, I'm not. Why would I start a cleaning service? There's a million out there. I'm not going to break the mold. Like, how am I gonna, you know,
Right.
be different than everybody else? And when Phil
Right.
started King of Maids, and he told me, I mean, freshman in college, I kind of looked at him and I was like, all right, buddy, you do you. We'll see how that goes. And
Yeah.
I bite my tongue now. Like I
Yep.
we would not be here if it wasn't for him. So
Right. Well, and I same reaction. I told people, hey, I'm going to start this cleaning business. People are like, what? Like, that's weird. Why are you doing that? And now I got a company making almost $2 million a year, and they're like, okay, I think I get it. But that's like the poison that keeps people from becoming entrepreneurs. That's the poison that keeps you in the entrepreneur. Like, oh, there's already a plumbing company. Why do I need to do plumbing? There's already a landscaper. This landscaper I pay $100 a month. Like, how could I ever charge $300? For one visit and run a landscaping company and make money. But you know what? I've got friends now making 5, 6, $10 million a year running landscaping businesses. And that's kind of the wrong way to look at it, right? Like, oh, there's so many other people doing this, I'm never going to make money on it. But the real thing is, because there are so many people doing it, it means that many people are making money. So typically what I look for now when I'm trying to invest in or purchase a business, and I'm looking to start purchasing businesses at this point, is, if you're the only person in the market, that's not necessarily a good market for me. Like, yeah, you're not going to have to do a lot of marketing because people are just going to find you if you're the only person selling, I don't know, horse buggy whips or whatever. But um, everybody in Arizona needs somebody to fix their air conditioner, and you can charge $14,000 for it, and they're just going to buy it. And your competitive advantage could simply be that you pick up the phone first and got somebody out there first, right? And they're going to need that. And so, yeah, there's 50 companies here doing that, but I guarantee if you start one, you're going to make millions of dollars. And that's that fallacy. Like, oh, everybody else is doing it, I'm never going to be able to make a dent. But truth is, you will be able to.
absolutely, just figure out what to do differently than
Mm-hmm.
everybody else and hammer that home and go with that.
Yep.
So Tidy Casa, when did you first start that?
I started it in 2015. Um, yeah, March of 2015. I don't think we had our first cleaning until like July. And yeah, it was, it was intimidating because I had done businesses before. This wasn't my first ever business. When I was 19 years old, I started a business doing video production where I just like would show up with cameras and help these businesses make training videos and stuff. I remember one company at the time they were called Allied Waste. It's now Republic Services. We closed them as a client, which is crazy. I'm like 19. I'm working for this Fortune 500 company. Yeah, they're doing garbage disposal, but whatever. And they like flew me out to Chicago, and we were like filming this training video. And after like the day of filming, they're like, "Hey, we want to take you guys out for a beer." And it was me and my buddy who were doing the company together, and we were like, "Oh, we can't." And they're like, "What do you mean you can't?" I'm like, "I'm only 20. I can't drink." And that was the first time that they had heard that we were that young. So that was kind of a cool experience. But through all these things, I was trying to do these like kind of sexy companies. Like, yeah, filming trash is not necessarily sexy looking back on it, but I was like, yeah, I'm a director, I'm a video producer, I'm a whatever. I did that. I tried to build some software doing local SEO reports back when I was doing I used to do local SEO. I was managing an agency. It had like 1,000 clients before I started my cleaning company. So I had done some of this stuff, and I mostly learned what not to do. And then eventually somebody just kind of put that idea in my brain that do something that everybody else is doing. Like video production is hard because there's not a lot of customers and you really have to go after it. It's very creative. Every product that you're making is different. So what's something that everybody else is doing? You can have some repeat business and build a stable income off of it. And of course, that's cleaning, right? Low ticket, but everybody needs it. You need it 2 or 3 times a month, and we're gonna have a stable business building that, as opposed to a lot of other companies that I know where if you're doing pressure washing or HVAC stuff, like, yeah, you get a higher ticket, but also it's less stable. We're
Right.
year round just money printing machine, which is awesome.
That recurring business that comes in
It's
is
everything.
just, it's everything. You see it. And when somebody signs up for a weekly service, I mean, come on, I don't think
Yeah.
there's anything better than that, and especially if
Yeah.
they got a big place and they start referring out their friends and family, it's almost becomes free money in a sense.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I tell a lot of people that are starting these companies. Like, oh, what do I need to grow my company? And but the long answer is you need systems, to manage higher growth. But if you have those systems in place, the only other missing key to the formula is time. Like these businesses will grow in time if you have good cleaners and you have the right systems in place. And if you ever feel like you're stuck, you either have bad cleaners or you don't have the right systems, or you just need to wait a little bit. Because like you said, you get that one weekly customer, they got this big place, they're coming every week, they refer their friends refer friends, and eventually it grows just by the nature of, existing, um, which is just a real important key piece to that.
100%. What about challenges that you've faced as a business owner? Maybe not so much the ones in the past, but
Yeah.
with Tidy Casa specifically.
Yeah. I mean, running a business is nothing but a series of challenges. And Angela Duckworth has this really great book called Grit that I really, really like, that illustrates this idea really well. The businesses that are successful, the business owners who are successful in business, I should say, um, they're not always the smartest. They're not always, the most creative or the most charismatic. But the one thing that almost every business owner has in common that is successful is this level of grit. And that just means having something happen to you, getting back up, learning from it, adjusting, and going back out and doing it again. So for me, tons of, I 3 or 4 businesses just kind of came and went. I made a little bit of money and never really went anywhere. When it comes to challenges with Tidy Casa, um, There's a ton. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so insurance is really challenging for me. Medical stuff is really challenging for me. Like my medications every month, if I didn't have health insurance, it'd be like $3,000 or $4,000. This is a really big burden. Um, and I remember when I was quitting my day job and moving into the cleaning business, it took me a really long time to figure out how to get healthcare, and just get that stuff paid for. I ended up being like, okay, no, we got this Obamacare thing. I'm just going to go on healthcare.gov, get some things signed up for that. And then I realized it wasn't really covering anything. It basically was set up so that it didn't cover my prescriptions at all. Like it wouldn't cover my prescriptions until I spent at least $6,000. And then it would cover like 50% of my prescriptions. And if you add in the fees that I was paying, I was basically breaking even on it. I was like, why do I even have this? So I started there, and then I realized that it was crap, but it took me like 2 or 3 months to realize it. And I was like just in the window to still get on Cobra with my previous employer and stay on their health insurance. So I pulled the trigger on that, and that gives you like a year and a half of runway to kind of figure stuff out. It's like, okay, I got it on Cobra, and I can stay in the system for a little bit, and now I got to figure it out. Um, talk to every health insurance person I could. Like, how does a one person get on this? And my company is also it's all independent contractors. So I've got some office staff, and then 40 independent contractors, right? Um, but back then, it's like, okay, how do I do it? And you start calling like Blue Cross Blue Shield and all those places. Like, okay, we can give you health insurance, but you got to have, two people that want to sign up for it to get on the group. And because you're a diabetic or whatever, it can't be your wife, it can't be your brother, it's got to be like another employee that you're not related to, all this stuff. And eventually I found a PEO called Insperity, which basically just runs your human resources, which was actually a really good thing for me, especially then. Like they taught me so much about the insurance I needed to have that I didn't. Like hired non-owned auto insurance. Nobody's ever talked to me about that. But if one of my cleaners gets in a car accident, and their auto insurance doesn't cover it, or they don't have auto insurance and they sue me, you'd be liable. But for like $100 a month or $100 a year, you can have hired non-owned auto and not have to worry about that. Very unlikely to pay out, but like, hey, that would suck if I found out. So anyway, got with this PEO, and part of the PEO is all my employees now get life insurance, they get health insurance or options for health insurance. And then I can get it. And they didn't need to have all my employees in it. I just had to run my payroll through them. So it's a little expensive to do that. But when I'm saving, $4,000 a month on medical stuff, it's worth it for me.
We talked about competition. How are you different than your competitors in your area? What would you say your best traits are?
Well, I don't know if I like this question, and I'm just going to say that because it's a hard one to answer. Because I think a lot of companies, you really have to be unique and individual and all this stuff. And I don't, quite frankly, I don't know if my company is. And that's just the honest truth. So what I would say is, we hire good people. We pay our cleaners more than anybody else pays them. We try to take care of people. We try to treat them with respect. We make sure like we really focus on retention for our cleaners. But I don't think it's any one thing. I think the thing that makes us different than a lot of other cleaning companies, and the thing that makes all cleaning companies that get to this level where you're doing $2 million a year successful, is we execute on a high level. So I've got my office staff. We train them on how to do sales, how to do customer service. We've got methodologies for how we handle angry customers, how we handle angry cleaning staff, systems in place for how we make sure the cleaning staff feels supported and taken care of, and ways to get them to stick around with us for longer, because it's really, really hard to get them to stick around. And then focusing on things during reporting time, like reoccurring cleanings. I think a lot of people just see the top line revenue and like, okay, this is my number. But what are you doing to keep track of your inventory? Like, how does this number relate to the inventory that you have to sell, meaning the booking spots available to sell? I've got 100 spots this week and I only sold 90, means maybe time to raise the prices or to hire more staff. Or I've got 100 spots available and I only sold 40. Like maybe we got to lower the staff or get rid of some staff or lower the prices, or we got to fix something because customers aren't coming. We got to up our marketing game, and when you can kind of tie those numbers together, that gives you a lot more information to work with. You're kind of measuring these more important elements. I don't know if there's any magical sauce, like we all wear pink hats and show up at pom poms or something. And I tried stuff like that. Like we would leave like thank you cards on every customer's place with like these really nice hand cut like soaps that were like everybody absolutely loved. They smelled amazing. I like bought them off Etsy. And we were doing like kind of cool stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it ended up no customers really cared about any of that. What they wanted is their house to be cleaned reliably. They wanted us to give them their time back, do it consistently every 2 weeks. They didn't want to worry about where's the cleaner, how much it's going to cost, whatever. They just wanted it to happen, get the job done so they can move on with their lives. And the more we kind of took a step back from our customers and being super involved, the better. That's not to say like if we find out a customer's, dad passes away or something, we always send them cards and cookies and, things like that. But, I think they want to have a relationship with their cleaner and they want it to be reliable. So
Absolutely. When it comes down to somebody actually trying you, then all those things, come into
right.
play. For me, this, I don't know, may sound crazy. Maybe some people will relate, but if I've got, 2 or 3 businesses lined up in front of me, I'll kind of go off the logo and the name that I like first.
Yeah. Right.
Like it,
Right.
and it almost sounds kind of crazy in a sense, but like I'll take one over another just because I like the logo better. And that's
Yeah.
just not necessarily that's saying that I haven't tried any of them yet, But
Sure.
if I have tried the one with the nice logo and they're crap, well then they're crap and I'm leaving them and I'm going next.
But hey, that's why Coca-Cola spends so much money on branding. Like all those commercials you see, they're not getting you to buy more Coca-Cola, but now you're familiar with this brand. You like the logo because it's just something because you've seen it on TV a million times. There's science to that exact thing. And that was another thing I really liked about the name Tidy Casa is it always kind of makes me laugh. It's sort of like a little like, I don't know, it kind of feels like it's a weird joke or something. But it's lighthearted. And I feel like that logo and that brand and the colors that we picked very like muted and soft kind of brings in that customer that like wants something a little bit more chill.
I
So
would definitely say that yours is one of the top on my list that I like name and logo wise. So
love hearing that.
fantastic. Prioritizing and managing your time as an owner, as well
Yeah.
as doing, business coaching. How are you handling that?
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, business coaching and running a business and doing all this stuff. Yeah, no lie. I'm not going to say that like, it's all peaches and rainbows and everything's great. It takes effort. But I will say one of the advantages I had is I never worked in the business. So as a business coach, one of the things I teach people about is the stages of business. We do like a 1 through 5, and businesses always get hung up on these different kind of stages, right? So there's $300,000, $500,000, $1 million, then 3 million, then 5, where businesses tend to get hung up. And usually, if you get stuck there, like I was stuck at $1 million a year for like 3 or 4 years before somebody pointed out to me, oh, you're at the stage of business at $1 million a year where you need to reinvent the systems that you're using to get you to the next level. I found a couple headaches and pain points, like my hiring process wasn't streamlined enough. We weren't keeping track of marketing well enough, so we had to adjust our marketing. And just made a couple of these like little tiny things, like how we were giving feedback to cleaners and stuff. And like in that year, we went from 1 million to 1.5 just because we put these systems in place. And I'm sharing that because when I first started out, I was never in that owner operator situation where I was the person. That's sort of the stage 1 business where you're kind of going $0 to $300,000 a year. You're doing all the work, doing all the marketing, accounting, and everything else. and trying to grow the business. So I was never there because I was working a full-time job as a marketing consultant doing SEO for a company called iCrossing, which is awesome. I was working with clients like PetSmart and, Starwood
Oh,
Hotels.
wow.
And yeah, it was super cool. Probably my favorite job. If I would have had that job before I started the company, I probably wouldn't have left. But anyway, that's another story. Um, but I was working that job while doing this cleaning business. And um, what that taught me, because I was working 40 hours a week and growing this company, and I got it to about $500,000 a year before I left. It taught me that I had to have two budgets. I had to have my money budget for how much I was spending on marketing and advertising and cleaners and all that stuff. And I had to have my time budget for how much time I was spending answering emails, interacting with systems like Thumbtack. Like Thumbtack was a pretty good lead source for me. I was able to get a lot of deals off it, but every deal I had to invest about 30 minutes into like going back and forth with the customer and setting dates and doing all this stuff. Whereas when I was with Yelp and giving them money, customers would just go book online, which was awesome. So it's okay. I might be getting more leads from this one, but this one's less time, so I'm going to put more money over to here. And that's a place that a lot of business owners really struggle, right? So you got to keep your own time budget, keep track of your time, and understand what your time's worth. That's another place where people really struggle. So, if you kind of look at the spectrum, you've got the $20 an hour work that's like data entry and calling customers back and responding to emails. And then you've got the $1,000 an hour work, which is, coming on podcasts like this or doing public speaking or, choosing better vendors for the system or, saving yourself a couple grand on payroll because you switched payroll providers. And you want to be doing that kind of stuff, the high level strategy and motivation and things like that. And you want to get rid of this $20 an hour work. So, with anything you're doing with time, can you delegate it to somebody else or automate it? And, then you end up with stuff that's left, which is, that $1,000 an hour work. So that's using Zapier, that's using, for the automation side, using Zapier or email rules and systems, or just hiring people and learning how to hire good people. So that was kind of the first thing is you got to get your time back. You got to make a time budget and you got to be conscious of doing that. It's because especially, like for me, I'm in my house right now. This is where I work. It's so easy to just constantly work when you work from home. But you have to make sure that whatever room you work in is a dedicated work room and just leave it at 5 o'clock or whatever time you said, like, hey, I want to work, 9 to 6 or 8 to 5 or I don't know, 10 to 2. Just get out of there when you're done and don't go back. Don't be, cut yourself off. Give yourself some work-life balance. And I promise you, so many people are like, no, I got to hustle. I got to get out there. I got to work 80 hours a week. And like, yeah, there's a part of it when you're in entrepreneurship and you're doing this stuff that, yeah, you do. When I was first starting out, I was working a 40-hour job and doing the business. It was 70, 80 hours a week. But once I was kind of through that phase and through that, I learned that like, hey, I've got to hire somebody to answer the phones for me. I can't be on the phones. I did that right away because after I was getting more than 2 phone calls a day and I was in my office, I can't just be sneaking out to the patio to make these phone calls and take people's credit cards. Like eventually I'm going to get caught. So I had to do that right away. But you had to learn that. And, that's a real important piece of this is, keep track of that time budget. Make sure that you're tracking it just like you are any dollar because it's way more valuable. And that's the other piece is that people underestimate how much they're worth. Like when I was saying, you got that $20 an hour work answering the phones and emails. If you're doing that as a business owner, you're undervaluing your own worth. Like as a business owner, you should be doing at least $200, $300 an hour work. And we want to get you to $1,000 an hour work. That's really where you want to be.
Leadership style. What
Yeah.
would you say you've evolved yours into? Because it's not one that you just kind of have. It's always changing. Especially
Yeah.
like you're saying, you do these $1,000 an hour roles. Your leadership style would be a little different if you're stuck in that $20 an hour role. You
Sure.
know. So,
Yeah.
what would you say your leadership style is now, having all this past experience?
What it's evolved to become is I need to be direct with people. And that was something that was really, really hard for me. I grew up in a very passive aggressive family. So being direct was like, I was always beating around the bush. And I had to learn that when I'm at work, I can't do that. I can't be too nice to people. You have to be direct. They're going to appreciate you for it. You got to give people feedback. Um, so that's a big thing. I try to make sure that I'm being honest and direct with everybody and letting them know where I am, where I sit. Like it didn't take more than one time of having an independent contractor, and this was like literally the first or second person I hired. It was like a month in, and they just weren't working out. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop sending them work. They're an independent contractor; they'll figure it out. I don't have to actually fire them. And it did not go over well, as you could imagine, because I was being passive aggressive and not doing that. And eventually, she called and called me out on it, like, what's going on? Do I have a job here? And I had to tell her no. And what I learned then is what I learned for everything in life, whether you're dealing with customer service or cleaners that you have to let go, you got to tell them before they tell you. So if a customer's complaining about something like, hey, you broke their toilet or whatever, somehow it exploded, you got to be the first person to call them. Because if they call you and say, hey, my toilet exploded, where are you guys on this? Now you're caught just being defensive because you weren't aware of the issue. But if you're bringing them the issue, you can say, hey, your toilet exploded. We already called 2 plumbers. We're going to get somebody over there and get this figured out for you. I'm really sorry this happened. Just know we're working on it. Way different conversation, right? Same thing
Absolutely.
for letting people go. So you have to be honest and direct. Um, you've got to you've got to create a culture where everybody else can be honest and direct with you too. So you can't overreact when somebody gives you bad news. You have to be the best person in the world to give bad news to. Um, and I always tell people I'm the best person in the world to give bad news to. Like I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to freak out. I'm very cool headed. This is something that I just always had naturally. I don't know if there's something I can teach, but you know, that's a big part of it. And you have to encourage people to share ideas. And, you know, so I do improv comedy, and it's a weird thing, and a lot of people are surprised that I like have this kind of weird side hobby. And like, you know, I've got a group and we go and perform like every month. And one of the things that improv teaches you is this idea of yes and. So when you're trying to build the scene with somebody, if somebody throws something out at you, um, like, hey, I'm, you know, the bartender at Shenanigans Bar, and you say, yeah, I love Shenanigans Bar, and the potato skins for $1 on Tuesdays are great. You know, it moves the story forward. Like I just made that up, but you know, it moves the story forward in some way where we kind of have an idea of like where we're at. And it came from yes and. Whereas if I'm like, hey, I'm, you know, the bartender at Shenanigans, and then somebody says, no, you're not. This is an AM PM. Now we hit a brick wall. And this same thing happens when you're ideating and problem solving in a business. And a lot of business owners find themselves doing this without realizing it. And what they're doing is killing innovation in the company and killing their ability to solve problems. So what you want to do is you want to yes and people's ideas. So say we got a problem, cash flow's not working. We have to fix it. If somebody says, hey, well, why don't we start moving some of these expenses off of, you know, our debit card onto, you know, a high points credit card? Pretty decent idea. Maybe it's not going to fix everything, but you can't say, no, it's a bad idea. Because as soon as you say that, then they're hitting a brick wall. It's not a safe place to give ideas. They just got shot down. So even if you don't like the idea, I say, cool, like I'm going to write this down on the sticky note. We're going to put it up on the board. What else do you got for me? And we'll see if we can come up with 5 or 6. Bad ideas are encouraged. Throw out bad ideas, you know, and try to get people, you know, throwing those at you, and you start putting them on the wall, and then you've got 10 different things, and now you can actually zero in on a good idea. Um, So that's all about creating a culture where people can give you bad news, people can tell you you're fucking up, and you can tell them that they're fucking up. That's my leadership style in a nutshell. My leadership style is yes and. Like, I'm going to support you. I'm going to make sure that you feel supported, and I'm going to be honest with you. And I expect you to be honest and direct with me in return.
Like you said, try and keep it moving along
Mm-hmm.
positively and not hit that brick wall, avoid that brick wall as much as possible
Yeah.
with doing so. So do you take that same philosophy with work life balance and trying to, keep a healthy one? I mean, working from home, it's
Yeah.
nice, but it's also hard. Like you said, you're always working, or you can always fall into always working. So how do you separate the two?
Well, I think, so I read a lot of books, and I try to go for what I've learned. I learn the most when I'm doing things that aren't business related. So, like, improv comedy taught me so many things about dealing with people and customers and emotions and storytelling and email writing and everything else that I do. I read this book of Stephen King's called On Writing, which is just a book about writing. And it's half a biography, half a book on like how to write. And one of the things that he suggests is have a dedicated room. Like, it doesn't matter if you're living in a trailer, which he explains that he had a spot in the trailer where he would, go, and there was like a ironing board that he would fold down and it just barely fit him. And he would put his, typewriter or whatever he was writing on back then on this ironing board. And that was his dedicated space for writing. So when he was in that space, he was writing. And then when he was out of that space, he wasn't. And I think that's really important, to have a dedicated space that is your working area. It could be, you don't really want it to be someplace where you're going to be doing other stuff like the kitchen table or whatever. Sometimes we're just kind of stuck there, but find yourself a work closet, the corner in some room of your house, and just say, that's when I'm in this chair, I'm working, and when I'm out of it, I'm not. And just divide yourself, and then prioritize doing things for you. Make sure that you're going to the gym, or going to play pickleball, or whatever it is that you like. Um, because the thing that happens is you start working 80 hours a week and you think you're being so productive, like, oh, I'm hustling, I'm getting everything done. But those last like 50, 60 hours of the week, you're burnt out. Like, I think most people realistically only have like a good 30, 35 hours of solid productive work in them. And by the time you're at the 50th hour, you're just you're sitting there staring at the screen, and people miss it. Because, like, a lot of times, like, if you actually time yourself in writing an email, you're like, oh, I'm just going to write this email, I'll shoot this off real quick, 5 minutes. If you actually start and stop a timer, it typically takes more like 20, 25 minutes to write a decent email, even really short ones. And then to get back out of that, your brain's got to kind of do some other adjusting, and to go on to the next task. And when you're at your 50th hour, those like weird tasks that feel like they're taking you 5 minutes are taking you way longer. Like, I don't know how many times I've just been completely exhausted. I'm like, okay, I just want to write this one marketing email. I'm going to type it up and get it done. And I got it done. And then I look at it the next day and I'm like, what did I write? Like, this is incoherent. Like, it's garbage. Um, and that's what happens when you're not doing that. So a lot of people think like, oh, I want to be successful, so I'm going to keep doing all these things. But really, set that time budget. Make sure you're using your time effectively, and then give yourself a break. Your brain needs it.
And that's just same thing with motivation and keeping that drive to continue with business, especially anybody who's starting early or just starting out. You
Yeah,
will burn out very quickly.
yeah,
I know I've seen somebody post recently in the Facebook community group about, I just started, but I don't know if I can kind of continue with this. Like, give me
yeah,
some words of inspiration. Like, how do you do it? It just try and break up tasks at the same time. Don't focus so much
yeah,
on one thing.
yeah,
Um, but again, don't force yourself to do 80 hours just because somebody told you to, just
yeah,
because you
yeah.
think you need to. If you have that much work, then go for it. But if you don't force yourself,
Yeah.
and make sure you have that separation and of that work life balance. You could have the 80 hours, but you can break it up as well. And like you said, read books or do what you personally like.
Yeah. And yeah, you shouldn't have 80 hours of work. That's the automate delegate thing. If you have 80, like if I wanted to, I could fire all my staff and have 100 hours of work every week if that I really wanted to do that. But I want to have a life. So I hired somebody to check the emails and to call customers back and to process all the credit cards for me and double check that things were happening and every other little weird thing that I have to do is either done by Booking Koala, done by Zapier through some automation, done by my executive assistant or a VA or somebody in my staff, and then that leaves me with the $1,000 an hour work. What could we raise our prices to this year that we're still going to be able to get customers and continue to grow, or spending time going on shows like this. So yeah, any entrepreneur can have 100 hours a week. So really the ninja, Ronin samurai skill is to cut away all that crap that you're doing and have good focused like 30-35 hours of work. And this is like, 40-hour workday with some lunch breaks and stuff, where you can do really, really good work instead of doing a bunch of crap work. It's like a quality over quantity thing.
Important lessons that you have learned, and we'll take it as a whole, all the businesses that you've done, not necessarily just with Tidy Casa. What would
Mm-hmm.
you say was most impactful for you?
Um, I think throughout my life, the one theme that I keep returning to is the value of kindness, the value of saying thank you. And it sounds really corny and stupid, but I'll I'll explain why. Disclaimer: this is a weird one. But one of the things that I learned is there was a moment in like 2020 where we lost a bunch of staff because of the pandemic, like everybody did. We started hiring new people, and then we were having a really hard time retaining them, whereas before we weren't. And the thing that I had to learn is my cleaners are human beings, and my office staff are all human beings. And one of the ways that we kicked up our retention, and we went from like, hey, I can't hang on to these people for more than like 3 months, was me spending a little bit more time with them during the hiring process. Just meaning, you know, we get on a Zoom call for a little bit, and that was helpful, but not quite there. So I started building a system where where I would call them before their first day and just say, hey, we're really excited to have you. Do you have any questions for tomorrow? Are you excited about tomorrow, first day with Tidy Casa? And usually, yeah, no, we're good. I got the app. I'm using Book and Koala. Everything's awesome. Cool. Excited to start working with you on Monday. And then after Monday, I would call them, hey, just want to check in. How are you feeling? Um, and what I learned by doing this is when I wasn't consciously doing this. So this more of a series. It's before the first day, after the first day, after the first week, first month, second month, third month, fourth month. So I'm calling them and just talking to them for like, it's like 5-10 minutes, maybe. Um, and just checking in. And the question's literally that, hey, Anna, I just want to see how you are. By doing that, I went from people wouldn't answer my phone calls because whenever I would call them, it was because they were in trouble, to everybody answered my phone calls all the time. And I was able to find things in the business that weren't working or that people had questions about when they were first starting. Like, oh yeah, I was really enjoying this, but I'm having trouble clocking in and out. Like, can you show me how to do that? Perfect. Yeah, let's figure it out. Let's get that right out of the gate, figured out, done, so you're set. Or like, hey, I was working with this one cleaner and she just wasn't doing as much work as me. I don't feel like she's pulling her weight. Like, hey, it's really good to know. I'm glad that you told me that. I'm sorry that that happened to you. We'll make sure not to schedule with them anymore. And just by checking in and asking how they are, A lot of times that'll even go like, okay, well, you can schedule me with them if you need to, but I just appreciate you asking me about it. And just by showing a little bit of empathy towards uh, people, it's served me so much. Like one of the reasons I'm in Conquer as a Conquer business coach is because I was participating in online communities and writing blogs and just going on things like this and talking to people and giving, free advice, right? Um, and you get so much more from, it's just somebody messaging you on Facebook and saying like, hey, how do you do this thing? Oh, here, this is what I did. Good luck, than you do, kind of being a hard ass about it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing for me. And like I said, I'm a business coach. Whenever I tell people like, hey, how do I get my employees to stick around longer? And I'm like, you got to treat them like people and be nice to them. Like people give me weird looks, but I swear to God, it has worked. Um, nobody quits bad jobs. They quit bad bosses. So it pays to go out of your way to be a good person.
I hope people realize how true and instrumental that is, because it is just, I feel like that would save so many more headaches with turnover.
Yeah,
It's not a business in where like drop shipping or products on Shopify, you're not, those are businesses where you're just yourself, you kind of take pictures, post it, and then your
yeah,
only customer service is refunds for people.
right,
This is a
right.
very customer centric business, in with the customers you deal with, and or people centric, with the customers you deal with, and the workers you have for you. So they work so much better by having that kind of, almost like a familial bond with you. And not in the
Yeah,
sense of, oh, we're a family,
sure.
corporate speak, but
Yeah,
legitimate, being like a friend or a family member for them to talk to. And like you said, not be scared to answer the phone when you call, but to be
right,
excited, to
right.
share their day with you. It goes that much further.
Yeah, and you can go really deep on building systems for this too. Like I said, I just when somebody gets hired, I have a form I fill out, and it puts these meetings on my calendar that they don't see, just me, and it says just hey, give this person a call and check in on them, and I follow it, just follow my calendar's telling me to do, and it works. And you can go really deep on this too. Like you would be amazed at how valuable it is. Have you ever read the book The Seven Love Languages?
I have not.
It's a relationship book. I bring this up in coaching every now and then, and I get weird looks. People are like, "Oh, why do you want me to slap my guys on the ass after?" And I'm like, "No, just trust me on this." Basically, the concept is there's seven different ways that people feel a sense of love, and this is for relationships, but it applies to business because this is universal for people's lives. And it is things like physical touch, gift giving, acts of service, spending time. So for somebody, when people don't have one or the other, they usually have multiple. But for somebody whose love language is getting gifts, just from like asking them during your onboarding, interview or talk, like, hey, what's your favorite snack food? Like, cool. Bugles, wrote it down, and then like 3 months later, just showing up to the office with a packet of bugles and like, hey, I got these for you. They're gonna freaking love you forever. Or just if it's spending time, like just every year on their birthday, take them out to lunch. It doesn't really cost you anything. You're going to be eating lunch anyway. And yeah, if you get 40 employees, it's going to be a lot. But people really value that type of stuff, so give them your favorite snack, take them to dinner on their lunch break or coffee. It doesn't even have to be out. You could just like pour them a coffee and sit with them, before they come in or before they get off to work.
With
Um,
going into hiring now, you said you have ICs doing the work,
mhm.
and then office staff. How many ICs and how many office staff do you have?
We just hired somebody new in our office, so I got I think 5 people in the office. An executive assistant, somebody that runs the schedule, somebody that kind of just deals with all the issues and manages everything, and then 2 people that are answering the phones and sales, and then about 40 actual cleaners, independent contractors. Um, so, yeah, it's gotten to be quite a beast.
Definitely sizable. And how many of those 40 would you say are over 20, 25 hours a week?
I think most of them are. Usually when they come on board, they want to get work, just hands down. And I always encourage them to have other gigs, like do cleans on the weekends, and a lot of them do. But we let them set their own schedule, and we make sure to tell them that in the beginning. Like, you can work as much as you want. You tell us when you're available, and we'll fill you up. And we respect it. So if they pull it back or add more, then we're good. But I think most of them are probably right around 30. Because they're independent contractors, are getting a percentage of everything, tips and cancellation fees and all that. So usually they're like, yeah, I want it 40 hours a week, because they're used to working for like Mary Maids and making, $16 an hour, not realizing that, hey, if you come work for Tidy Casa, you're really making 30, 40 an hour. You don't need that many hours. So most of them will come and really excited to work 40 hours, and then they'll usually pull back to like a nice comfortable like 30, 32. 2 houses a day. They're, each house is taking them maybe 6 hours or maybe 3 hours, so 6 hours a day total. So they're kind of in and out.
How many jobs would you say on average you're doing a week?
um you were usually doing about 120, 130 depending on the week.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And
haven't looked at that
for
number in quite a
for
while.
where you do your hiring, what do you use most? Indeed, Facebook, a mix of things.
Indeed. I tried everything for so long, but Indeed's just been consistent. And, Indeed, Craigslist, Care.com, I'm completely apathetic to any system. I just want to use something that works. And every time I try something different, like even ZipRecruiter, Indeed's just where it works. There's the right people on there, they're qualified candidates, but there are tricks to it that nobody tells you. So the tricks to Indeed are, you can't just let the ad run. So many people make that mistake. Just like, I had an ad, I was paying like $500 a month, and I just let it run for like 2 years. And then finally, a friend of mine, Chris Willett of Alpine Maids, great guy, super smart, was like, oh no, you can't do that, just let it run for like a month. Because what happens is Indeed prioritizes the the relevancy of a job ad by how new it is. Just assuming like, hey, this job ad's been here for 2 years, they're assuming it's you forgot about it. So what I eventually learned to do is I just post that job ad. So I started as like a month, and then I cut it down to like a week, and then I cut it down to 3 days. And I get the same amount of applicants when I post that job ad for 3 days and then pause it than I did for posting it for 2 years. Um, so anytime I need people, I turn that job ad on 3 days. I've got automated systems that will, send them. They basically apply online. If they qualify, it'll send them an email to set up an interview with me via Calendly. They put the email on the Calendly thing on my calendar, and then we talk. Um, and that, cutting out the distance between me having to sit and review versus we just have a Zapier thing running that will review it for me and then invite them, saved me so much time, that I went from being able to hire maybe one person every 3 months, so I can do like three or four a month. Um, and if I really want somebody, it usually doesn't take me more than like 2 weeks to get a new candidate in. So that was one of the big things that we ended up fixing when I was stuck at that $1 million range, is being able to hire way faster and then retaining people after they got on board, which just came down to me calling them, apparently.
That's a huge tip you just gave. Is I feel a lot of business owners that use Indeed kind of go that route,
Yeah.
turn it on and let it run, but don't go
Yeah.
into making those minute adjustments
Yeah.
and
When it totally makes sense. Like, that's Google ads or Yelp ads or whatever. You turn it on, it works, it does its thing. But Indeed prioritizes how new that ad is. They're assuming that job probably got filled if it's been out there for 2 or 3 months. So I literally just posted for a couple days. I do like $40 in ads a day, and I don't even honestly know if I have to spend any money on it. Um, and then Indeed won't tell you either that you can take those uh, leads externally. So you have to call them and request an external URL for an application process. So like if you want to use a Google form or Typeform, we have people apply on our WordPress site through uh, a tool called Gravity Forms. So that's where we send them. Um, but yeah, that's what we do, and it's been working really really well. But yeah, makes sense. But yeah, don't let those ads run. Keep them fresh.
And it also allows you to set up like hiring quickly or looking to fill quickly so that
Yep.
applicants can see that and see that it's more pressing for you and more likely to, instead of them be like, oh, I'll apply for this later on, I'll do this
Yeah.
now, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and that was one of the things that took me from a million to 1.5. So it's just figuring out that little piece.
So then, for revenue wise, what are you closing out 2023 with, and what have you done in total since you started, if you know?
We're getting close to $2 million a year. We're right about the $2 million a year run rate. I think we're going to close out 2023 at about 1.8 or right around there. Um, and yeah, you had asked me this question. I had to go look it up. We've done about $10 million since we started, and that was in 2015. So it's been going on like 8 or 9 years now. 9 years, 8 years. I think we're getting pretty close to eight.
8 years,
Um,
maybe seven and a half.
yeah, and so about 10 million, but most of that was in the last couple of years. Because for a good chunk of time there, it took me maybe 3 or 4 years to get to a million, and then I got stuck at a million for like 3 years until I learned about building systems and re-evolving the business, um, and then it just kind of took off.
Huge. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody that I've talked to, you have surpassed the total revenue, and you are at the number one spot so far for the year total. So congratulations,
I'm
definitely.
excited.
And you're doing it all out of one location, right? All just in,
Well, we do have two. We're do one in Phoenix and one in Tucson, Arizona. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't have gone to Tucson. I think I
okay.
assumed that to grow, it was easier to have $2 million locations and one $2 million location. Hindsight, don't do a second location. It's there's a reason that Mary Maids is a franchise. It's very hard to work remote, and that's another thing that I had to learn. It's a whole different business running a full remote location. Like everybody's remote, we don't actually have an office, but now they're 150 miles away versus we can get together and have a coffee here. Just it changes things so much. So yeah, one of the locations only does, we're just now starting to grow it because I had to learn how to run it different. But I should have just been investing that money in the main location because that's where we make 90% of our revenue.
You learn
Yeah.
these things over time. Couple last questions here for you. Booking Koala, when did you sign up for it? How long have you been using it?
I signed up for it, I think in 2021. I was using a different piece of software before, but it was just having a lot of trouble with downtime and reliability. I heard really good things about Booking Koala. It had a lot of the same features that the other software did, plus a few more. And, Booking Koala just has uh, a history of being transparent, not gatekeeping, listening to customer feedback, which is something that other software lost when it got sold. So I bounced over right around then. I've been happy using it ever since.
Excellent. Favorite feature that you would have to go with?
I mean, it's online booking. It's just so valuable to have something keeping track of the calendar. Like if we just had to boil it down to like just main reason. Um, and yeah, there's something I want to say in my head, but I'm probably not going to say it.
You
Just
can go ahead.
Well, there's other softwares out there that I have relationships with and I can't work with because they don't have these easy online booking features. A lot of other softwares like Service Titan or Jobber or whatever are very built on send an invoice, close the invoice. Like I love the reoccurring appointments, keeping track of reoccurring appointments, keeping track of how much we owe the cleaners. Like all this stuff is like just so valuable. Um, and a lot of these other software suites just don't do that kind of thing. So that's the key feature that I like with Booking Koala.
So the main thing that runs and kind of drives the business.
That's it. That's the 80-20 rule. That's at 80% right there.
Last question. Think back to your 10-year-old self. What advice would you give him now that you got all this business knowledge?
I mean, the biggest thing, the thing that started this whole journey for me was just somebody telling me you don't have to be the first person in a market to do a thing. A crowded market is a good sign that everybody's making money, so jump into a crowded market. And don't try to do a business that nobody else has heard of or done. It's going to be 1,000 times harder. It's super risky. Um, do something that somebody else has already done. Second mover advantage is huge, and don't undervalue it. And if I could give a second piece of advice, it's, don't be afraid of failure. A lot of people overestimate the cost of a failure. But we're here in America. Like if you fail as an entrepreneur, people are still proud of you. You don't lose anything by losing as an entrepreneur. In fact, you gain knowledge and experience, and the next business will be even better. So don't give up if you've lost. Don't overvalue the cost of failure, because that'll keep you from trying new things and experimenting and growing. And get into a crowded market and don't be afraid to mess it up.
Absolutely. Ryan, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your story. Everybody else, we will see you next week for another episode of the Qualified Podcast. Take care.